Hey guys, welcome back to Portal of Wisdom. I'm back today with another story for you. If you are new to the channel, like and subscribe and click that little post notification bell so that you get alerted when I post my new videos. And now on to today's topic. Today's topic, we're going to talk about a lost payroll in the mountains somewhere near the Pennsylvania-Maryland border. And this is from the time of the French and Indian War. So what had happened is during the startup of the French and Indian War, what happened was that the French had built this Fort Duquesne, in right around what is present day Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And the British didn't like this, so they saw it as kind of encroaching on their territory, and they had sent a very capable general, Edward Braddock, from Britain. They sent him to the colonies, and they sent him with like 1,500 men, and they started at Fort Cumberland in the Maryland Panhandle and had to go. I think it was about 220 miles over the Allegheny Mountains, and on some rough roads that and just bad conditions and everything. So Braddock had 1,500 British men in the full red regalia, the way that they normally dressed, and they marched in fashion and everything, and they had all kinds of artillery and supplies, and they even had a payroll wagon with a paymaster. And Braddock led them from Fort Cumberland, Maryland, over the mountains, and he finally arrived at a point about 8 miles from Fort Duquesne on July 9th. I think this was 1755. So he arrives a few miles from the fort, and I think he's then going to make his plan for attacking the fort. He thought if they took the fort back, then they could push the French out of the area. And so he's got his 1,500 men there, and he's about to give the orders for them to set up camp and make some plans and get ready to attack. And then they are attacked by the French, a force of like 900. And I think there were also some, of the Native American forces and Canadians and stuff too that were on the French's side. So the British are caught completely off guard. They've marched a couple hundred miles. They're probably pretty tired. They were probably ready to, relax and eat and recharge and go to sleep and then continue on the next day with whatever the plans were. So being caught off guard was difficult for them, and the British were pretty easy pickings in their their red coats and everything. And it was said that the French and the Native American forces were hiding amongst the woods. So a lot of disarray happens. The British troops start scattering. They weren't ready for this. They're getting picked off right and left. General Braddock gets injured. He ends up actually dying 4 days later, so he's pretty severely injured, and everything, this whole battle plan kind of falls apart before it was even able to be put together. So a lot of the British are then retreating and trying to figure out what to do. So the battle went on, I think they said, for about 3 hours. About half of the British were killed there, and then the rest started retreating because it was just a complete chaotic mess. So they're retreating through the Pennsylvania woods. It was known as Braddock's Retreat, and it was clear that the French and Indian forces overpowered the British, and then basically what happened was Braddock had sent the paymaster that was assigned, 6 soldiers. He told the paymaster to pack up the payroll, all the gold coins and everything onto the fastest, stoutest horses so that they could deliver it back to Fort Cumberland in western Maryland. And it's estimated that this payroll was about $25,000 in gold coins and probably gold and silver coins and stuff. So anyhow, these six troops depart on four. I think it was four horses that were loaded down with with the payroll. So they're leaving the scene in kind of a southeasterly direction. They're heading back toward Fort Cumberland. So the whole time that the payroll team is heading back to Fort Cumberland, they're also being pursued by the French and the Native Americans. And of course, the British don't know these woods very well. The Native Americans know them well, and they are helping the French pursue a lot of the retreating British and this crew of these payroll soldiers trying to get back to Fort Cumberland with this payroll. So anyhow, on many occasions, these British soldiers that they get lost, they get off of some of the main paths, or they need to hide in the woods to try to get away from their pursuers. And on a few occasions, there's gunfire that erupts between them, and a couple of the payroll guards got overtaken by the French troops, and this is going on for quite some time. They're pursuing them. So during one of the chases, they appeared to get away, and at this point they are, I believe, on a road. There's a little creek, and or maybe it was a small pond of water, and some grasses for the horses to drink and graze. And so the payroll soldiers, stop here. I can't remember how many of them were left at this point. So they stop here. They let the horses drink and graze a little bit. They think they've finally lost the French, and all of a sudden the French soldiers were lying in ambush, and two of the guards were killed in the first volley of shots at this ambush. So there were four remaining soldiers at this point, and they hopped on the payroll laden horses that they're carrying a lot of weight. So they hop on these horses and they try to get the heck out of there. And the French are shooting at them as they're trying to get out of there. And I believe at this point, two more were shot from their saddles and killed. And so now there's only two surviving payroll guards that are still trying to get back to Fort Cumberland. And at this point, I think they had thought they maybe were 15 or 20 miles from the fort. So this was a pretty long pursuit. But the French's allies, the Native Americans, they obviously knew these woods way better than the British, and were able to keep on top of them. So there's two guards left. And at this point, they're trying to figure out, what to do. They decide they need to make a stand, and they had gotten a little bit ahead of the French. It doesn't really say in the accounts how many were pursuing them. So they tie up their horses to some rocks. They're hiding out of sight, and they're getting ready to fire upon their pursuers when they eventually see them. And finally, I believe they do see some of their pursuers, and they start firing at them, and they drive them away. But at this point, they know that their horses are weighted down pretty heavily. So they know that it's not going to be easy to get away from the French fully loaded down when their horses aren't so loaded down. So at this point, they think they got to do something with their their payroll that they still have. So they repack all the payroll onto 2 horses and turn the rest of the horses loose, possibly to confuse the French if horses go running by them in a different direction or anyhow. So these 2 remaining soldiers or guards have all the remaining payroll on these 2 horses, but they're very weighted down with all the gold now. So they know that the horses are getting tired real quick, and they're looking for a place to do something with this payroll at this point. I don't think they're going to be able to make it back to Fort Cumberland with the payroll at this point. So they were on this little road that was parallel to a small stream. And there was a place where the water flowed around a large boulder in the middle of the channel. And one of the riders spotted a shallow cave up the hill on the north side of the trail. He pointed it out to his companion, and then together they rode up the slope, and their tired horses were barely making it up this steep incline, and they reached this low cave. They took those heavy packs, leather saddlebags, and they're loaded full of gold and everything. They took them off, and they put them in the corner of the cave and tried to cover them with some soil and rocks and leaves, and then they remounted and rode back down the slope and tried to make mental note of where they had stored this payroll so that they could come back for it a little bit later. So obviously it takes a little bit of time for them to go up the slope and ditch all the payroll, try to cover it up, and then come back down the slope down to the road. And no sooner than they had pretty much got back down on the road, not more than a few minutes, 10 minutes later or so, they're ambushed again. And this time it was said it was by 3 Native Americans. And one of the soldiers was killed instantly from the bullet from the Indians, the Indian musket that he was shooting. And the remaining guard was also struck, and he basically was shot off of his horse, and when he hit the ground, he quickly crawled away into some thick bushes and brush, and in the confusion, he managed to stay hidden, but he's weak and he's bleeding, and at this point, nobody, no one notices him. They're not sure. They're probably pretty sure that they shot him and hit him, and think that, well, he's probably dead. Maybe he fell down the slope a ways or something like that. And so finally they abandon the chase. They think they've killed everyone. So this last remaining guard, he's not doing too well, but he's eating some berries and stuff, and he's trying to survive. And then he's found 10 days later by a British scouting patrol that's coming down that road. So then he's taken to Fort Cumberland, and he's treated by the physician there, and then he manages to tell them the whole story about the hidden payroll. So after a couple of weeks and finally feeling better, this payroll guard takes a platoon of soldiers back out to the area that he believed this cave was located, where they hid all of this gold payroll coins and everything. So they arrived to the place that he thinks it is that they hid the gold, and he's unable to find the part of the stream containing this big giant boulder, and they're looking around. They check a bunch of different caves, and he finally confesses that he's lost. He doesn't seem to be able to find this same area. So they search for like 3 days. They don't find anything. They search all kinds of caves and everything, and I think at this point they're not sure if he's lying and and is going to eventually try to keep the money for himself, or if he's truly just lost and he got confused and he can't find, where the payroll was hidden. They're not really sure at this point. Some people think that he was just confused because he was surviving in the brush for quite a few days after he was injured before he was found, and maybe he got a little bit confused or turned around with where he was at. But then other people think that he's going to come back for the gold later. So anyhow, nothing ever gets resolved at this point. They never find this gold payroll treasure. But in 1881, there was a deer hunter, and he came across some weathered old scattered bones in the woods not far from the tiny Maryland town of Piney Grove, and that's less than 20 miles east of Cumberland. Among those bones, he found some rusted buttons that were later identified as the type used on British soldiers' uniforms during the French and Indian War. So at this point, they're thinking this may be one of the fallen payroll guards that was on that retreat and was murdered. But the problem here is when this deer hunter tries to retrace his steps or get back to the area that he believes he found these, the bones and the buttons, he can't find this exact area. So anyhow, so this remains lost at the time. So in 1907, there's a trapper, and he's trapping on a stream, and he normally trapped in the Maryland Panhandle and parts of southern Pennsylvania. And there was a severe rainstorm that happened while he was either setting up traps or checking his traps, and he spotted a little cave on the hillside, and he climbed up to the cave to wait out the rainstorm. So as he waited for the rain to subside, he gathered a pile of branches and leaves from the floor of the cave, and he started a small fire for warmth and waited out the storm. And he discovered a few pieces of rotted leather under some of the debris, and he didn't really think anything of that, because he didn't know about the story at that point. So he has a small fire. He warms himself back up. The rain finally stops. He doesn't think anything. He doesn't dig into this pile anymore or anything like that. And he leaves. And about 10 years later, he happens to mention this incident to a friend who had a lot of knowledge about the area, and he told about the lost British Army payroll, and they believe that was the cave that he was in was probably where the stash was, but they attempted to relocate that cave and were never successful. So in 1941, a Piney Grove resident was on a hike on the old military road that led to Old Fort Cumberland when he spotted something shining in the road. So he investigates. He discovers it's an old British coin. And anyhow, so he's looking around, and he sees a few tiny little water seeps running down the hill, and he notices, a little bit of runoff coming, from a little bit higher up the hill, and he thinks, well, the coin may be washed down onto the trail from a little higher up, and so he climbs up, a few yards up the hill, and he spots another coin. And then he goes uphill a little further and looking, at the slope and everything, and searched for another couple hours or so, and he didn't find any more coins. But I think he discovered that those were old British coins, and people thought that those coins probably belonged to that payroll. So I think it was quite a few months later he learned about the British payroll, and he discovered those coins he found most likely belonged to that payroll, and he went back to try to locate where it was that he found these coins. And I think he went back for a couple of months or so, and he was never able to find anything. He was never able to determine exactly where it was that he had found these two coins. So at this point, the mystery still remained. And that's basically where things still remain today. They basically know that they believe that the treasure is maybe somewhere around 20 miles east of Cumberland, Maryland, somewhere off of an old military road in a cave up on the hillside. There's a creek with a big boulder in it in the middle of the creek at that point, and those are some of the reference points, but no one has been able to find this lost payroll yet. I believe someone was asked about what the value would be of those coins, and it was believed that they would bring well over $1 million, probably, obviously depending on condition and situation. But this payroll could be worth over $1 million today if someone is able to find it. So like and subscribe if you like these kind of stories.